data. So ADmantX is a semantic targeting company. We look at content, we analyze content, and we put contextual targeting data behind it. We ingest URLs, and we put out data about those URLs. So if you're unfamiliar with that targeting methodology, very different from behavioral targeting, different than retargeting, different than lots of other targeting methodologies, although they have a tendency to support one another, and that is basically the bottom line for today is the use of contextual targeting in an audience context. So when you think audience segmentation, audience targeting, etc., we at ADmantX want you to also think about the use of contextual as part of that important part of the analysis that should be conducted. And logically, or the notion here is that what people read also makes up a good deal of their mindset, their emotional status. We like to think of the context of what people are reading or observing online as the final mile from the curb to the consumer's brain, if you will. Audience data, behavioral data is good stuff, but it happens to be, or has a tendency to be, a little longer, a little older. We like to think of the freshness of what a consumer is viewing and reading and interacting with online as that final mile. And so the techniques and technology I'll be talking about today are really to get at that last mile. What is it the consumer is thinking and feeling? And that has a great deal to do with the last few things that they have been consuming and reading online. I'm going to show you just for a moment some of the basics on how that operates. Bear with me for those of you who might have seen it either from us or from another provider. But I want you to be able to, there we go, be able to understand the basics. Okay, so, and shout out please if you don't see something that I'm describing on the screen, all right? So here is a way to peek at some of the interior engine, semantic processing engine from ADmantX. And this, in our particular case, is a fully linguistic engine. There are other methods that use statistics or combinations of NLP and statistics. We think we have beaten the rap on processing speed and have achieved instead a much better set of performance metrics in terms of reach and lift or accuracy and recall in the use of this particular fully natural linguistic approach. So let's test that proposition out. So let's say if we, let's see, my car eats gas when I step on the gas. So here's one piece of content. I hope you can see that on your screen well enough, but it says my car eats gas when I step on the gas. So a silly sentence, but you'll see why it's important to have that in a moment. If I feed this sentence to the engine, I'm going to get back the things in the gray boxes around the edge. Those are categories: motor vehicles, engineering, chemistry, how the words fit together logically, the roles they're playing, like a subject, an object, and an action, being eat in this particular case, or step here. And over here on the bottom left, you'll see some further markup of the words in that sentence, adjectives and nouns and other things that we were taught to understand and look for as kids when we're reading. Red and green markup mean it's a compound sentence. You could put a period right there, and those two pieces would stand alone. GN is a group noun. C is conjunction. It combines the red and the green, and so on. Lots of ways of analyzing and understanding content. The most important of which, however, from a contextual perspective, is the following: the use of a definition behind each word. So I purposely wrote this sentence to have the word gas twice, because as a human reader, you immediately understand in the context of the sentence, the two gases are not the same. This gas, as shown by the engine, the assignment of a definition by the engine is in fact correct. This gas is gasoline, and this gas is gas pedal or accelerator. And so this is an important step from an advertising perspective alone, just on the semantic processing alone, to understand the definition behind the word. If an advertiser was an aftermarket car parts maker, this is the gas they want. They don't want this gas. Likewise, an oil producer or a gasoline station owner, he wants this gas and not this gas. So to be able to distinguish these two is true contextual targeting. Okay, so let's leave that aside. We can come back and play with that a little bit later if we want. You grow this large and you'll begin to see that when we do this on scale, we do this through about 900 categories, 900 IAB categories. Then there are safety categories. And we utilize this technology for optimization, for brand safety. And then what we're talking about today, we use it in addition to those things for a set of data to understand the audiences in a much richer way. And again, what makes us different in this arena is the precision that we can find behind the content. So when I just showed gas and the correct definition behind each, our challenge to anybody who's in the contextual game is, do you put a definition? Would you dare to try to accurately put a definition behind the word, which is, again, the truest sense of context. You'll also see, which I'll show in a moment, an output of our engine, which is the emotional side. So there are categories, but there are also emotions. When we consume content, we as consumers, that content affects us. It triggers emotions. Something that I read might make me angry, happy, sad, envious. It might motivate me. It might inspire me, etc. All of these things are emotions. Quite a bit different than categorically what the content itself is about. Again, everybody's mic is open today, so at any time you have a question, just shout out, and we can stop and handle it. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. All right, so what we're going to talk about today in particular is this idea of what we call semantic audience profiling. Again, the notion is quite simple. Audience data typically is somewhat historical. We know a person, again, sorry if it's a little squeezed, we know a person came from Google, what they bought last week, they clicked here, they have some certain number of demographics, you can sniff their IP, they're a frequent visitor, they spend $30, etc. So all of these help us understand the person in a long-term historical context. What we also like to call Jenny, this fictional person Jenny over here, is both the historical Jenny, what she's done, but what about the right now Jenny? So when she's reading something and that piece of content is about marriage and style, or finance or shopping, and it also might be triggering emotions like positive sentiment and being an active person, etc. These are pieces of information that, combined with the historical Jenny, get us to what we call the engaged Jenny. So I want to show you, I want to step through individual steps so we can see that in action and see what that looks like. Step one is to take the ad server log file. So if my goal is to use this targeting technique in a new way, the first place I need to look for is the ad server log file in this example. Now I've highlighted what I mark up as user 1 and user 2 in the green and the purple. And so a date and time stamp, and I've shortened this considerably, but then you also, and cleaned it up considerably, but you also see the URLs that someone had clicked through, and then there is a cookie ID associated with that user. I've sorted them by user. So I'm picking on user 1 and then user 2 in the green and purple. Let's try this for a moment and see where we're going. So here are a couple of those URLs that were in the list. So here's a page about the NSA, and sorry, no, it's not about the NSA. It's about a security firm not doing their job in the Snowden case, as you see down here. So if we send this URL to our engine, you'll see this depth of information coming back. Anything with an underline is what we call an entity, a person, place, or a thing. So government is a thing, Edward Snowden is a person, and so forth. Here's another organization, some government agency, USIS, and so on. Here are the standard categories that all of this content fits into: government, politics, legal issues, business, law, company, and then the emotions. So it's negative, has something to do with violence, motivations, etc. So I won't get into the custom categorization. If you're interested in what this means, we can get into that at another date, or you can ask me towards the end. So a rich set of data about that particular URL. Now here's a completely different, and this was another URL in that same profiled person's in the log file for that particular cookie ID. And if we process this page, of course it's going to be quite a bit different. We can tell it was about skiing, so the system is able to see downhill skiing as a superset, sports as a superset of that, and it's positive sentiment. A little less content over here, but people, places, countries, places within the country, etc. So I'm just trying to demonstrate for you, and I've only picked 2 pages from the first user. If we go to the second user, it wouldn't be a surprise to notice that this is quite a bit different kind of content. And again, you'll see family and work and social and motherhood, positive sentiments, and an emotion called success from this particular page. And then right after that, there was a page over this person perused from WebMD, and if we process that, again, this must be a woman because she's reading about women's health and a story about women in business. So this one happens to be about health and diabetes, and of course then the sentiment here is a little bit on the negative side, something that makes you worry, but also might motivate you to take certain behaviors to help prevent. So that's a little bit of a peek behind each URL. Now when we look at this in a little more detail, excuse me. So again, here is the, hold on a second. Here is the slide again that sort of details the web page becoming this data, as you see over here, as step 2. And of course, if you do this at high speed for each of the users or the users group, you're going to end up with a boatload of data. So again, I've shortened this up a bit on the slide so it's easier to see. And in this instance, we ran 4 URLs for each user, each for user 1 and then user 2. And then, once you post-process all that information, you can arrange it neatly against the categories and emotions, add up the scores, as I've done down here at the bottom. And then you do a little twist on that and do a rank ordering. You end up with this nice set of vectors that become new targeting criteria. So here's user 1. This is probably I don't know, could be a man looking at sports and skiing and something to do with you know, lack of oversight in the government, and we are suspecting over here this is clearly a woman because looking up women's health. Not necessarily, of course. If we, and again, this is where the combination with the existing audience data, the historical Jenny side of the data, would confirm or deny that this is a woman. It could be a man looking at women's health issue for someone he cares for, but my guess is this is a woman and this is a man. But these become appended, and diagrammatically these become appended as we have done here. We've opened the log file, processed per user ID, and then that goes back into a separate storage, you know, against the audience data, or perhaps is fed to a partner DMP. But the important part here is that you're creating these vectors, which are changing all the time. They may flow over time, and these are done by, in this example, they're done by individual user, but there's a larger context number in the following sense. One is this vector per user ID will change quite frequently. Certainly the variability will be large in the beginning, but over time this will have a tendency to congeal around certain issues, both of them. And number two, you can take the larger context and segment your audience, and again have a larger audience segment vector, which will also settle down after a certain amount of time. And so because you're storing and utilizing that targeting data, that enhanced targeting data, you can sort and do whatever you like with it. So here is a couple of interesting case studies that look at that methodology. Just the highlights here from the Mormon Church. Maybe I don't know how many people from overseas. That's a particular religious group here in the United States, but they wanted to target life change content. They you know, obviously want people to attend their church. Their targeting was for their advertising was to look for people who are reading content that suggests they are in some kind of transition in their life, and it's a appropriately you know, interesting way of promoting a religious institution. And so what they found in this approach, you know, after a while, that it got a 250% increase in their website traffic. So finding the right kind of content, in addition to the audience understanding previously, as I've detailed in the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, has given them a 250% increase in their website traffic. It's logical. It makes sense. Again, if we know a lot about the person historically, and suddenly we know a lot about what they're reading in the current period, and the correct ad shows up in front of their eyeball, they're much more likely to notice, to click, to be engaged. And at least this simple metric for the Mormon Church was a 250% increase in website traffic. Here's another magazine, a publication called Ruby Loves, and it's targeting teenage girls. So they had a nice improvement in their click-through rate, more than double of that, as you can see the statistics on the page. So and the target there is about safety. So finding content that spoke to issues about safety for teens, safety online, safety in school, safety in relationships, and so forth, was the goal. And what they found is if they advertised in the, you know, off their own property, but advertised the magazine on content that matched those issues, it brought people to the Ruby Loves publication in a much greater sent. So again, more than 100% increase in their click-through rate. Now we all know there's problems with those metrics, but it's directionally it's indicative of the approach that we've detailed. So let me stop there, please, and ask what kind of questions you have in this particular approach. I'm happy to get in much more detail. Maybe I should start with something simple like, is this new to the group? And again, please, the group is small enough today that we can all pipe up as you see fit. So just shout it out if there's a question you have in mind. But I'll start by asking if this is something new for most people, this idea of processing URLs per user in a way that gives you greater insight into that user or that consumer. Is that something new for people? Let's see, we've got Josh on the line, Eco, Gail, and Brian. We have four people online, and I'm not hearing anything. Who wants to tell me what they think?
Okay, I'll stand up. It's very interesting. I'm quite new to semantics, and I came across the procedures just a couple of weeks back, and I'm quite interested in as much as I will be trying to use it for some portals which I am actually at the moment putting up. Okay, that's just to give you a voice.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, thank you. Yeah, this is, again, this is an area that we specialize in as ADmantX. The parent company where we all came from and the technology that has been given to us to concentrate in the ad industry has been perfected over many, many years, 20 years to be exact. Several hundred person hours of investment and perfection and deployment across industries, not always advertising, but for government, for intelligence agencies, for security agencies, for industry, etc. And so getting the correct accuracy, getting the correct recall, so finding the right things and then understanding deeply each piece of content is at the heart of what makes this work. And then in advertising, again, it's protect the advertiser against content that might be objectionable, and that goes beyond just whitelisting domains. It means understanding what's in that domain. So some domains, some publications can be perfectly safe. Think Wall Street Journal, New York Times, I don't know, motherhood.com. But there are instances where content within those sites can be objectionable in general, or they can be objectionable to a specific advertiser. And so it gets very complicated very quickly when you're trying to make sure that your advertiser, the person who's paying your bills, remains happy. And so analyzing deeply the content in which you want to place your ad or have the ad placed is vital. It's sort of job one. And if that's true, then the opposite must also be the case. And that what I mean by that is how to optimize where the placement of the ad goes. So if some pages are bad, there are lots of pages that are not bad, but they may not be optimal. And so it's a grand game of utilizing beyond 4, 6, or 8 simple keywords where you're going to put an ad. In a programmatic world, that must be done at high speed, at high volume, and with a great deal of accuracy. You've got milliseconds to microseconds to make up your mind about where the ad should go, or if you're the publisher, what you will sell to whom. So getting it right between the buyer and the seller. It may sound like fractions of pennies, but over many millions of transactions, it adds up, and it adds up quick. So optimization, number 2. And today's topic, number 3, is, hey, as long as we're analyzing the pages, why not analyze pages as they're attached to individuals? So we get a deeper understanding of who that person is, what interests them, more importantly, what interests them in the last 10 minutes, in the last day, and not rely on perhaps something that's a week old, a month old, a year old. Again, chances are we may get it wrong in terms of targeting on an audience perspective. Let's use every bit, every hint we can to understand the audience as deeply as possible, and we believe content is part of that equation. Other comments or questions, please? Okay, well, you see some contacts for us on the board, on the slide in front of you. You can also use some of the emails that you have from us to contact us at any time during the invitation and response cycle in your email to get back in touch with us. We welcome any inquiries. If you do have questions and you'd rather keep those private, we certainly understand that. Myself or someone else on our staff are available to work through details, further demonstrations, answer your questions about how this or anything else that I've talked about today would be of use to you. So we appreciate your sorry, here, Brian, I see you're asking a question. For anybody else who's planning to drop off, we appreciate your attention today, but let me answer Brian's question. Are you able to control for multiple people using the same computer and browser so they're not attributed as the same person? Somewhat. It is a difficult problem because the cookie ends up getting attached to multiple people, it's true. But there are interesting statistical means to try to separate users. And that relies on, again, on the content that they're reading. So you can do some pattern matching, for example, for individual IDs. Again, there will be a pattern of males between certain age, located in certain regions, et cetera, et cetera. They'll end up having a contextual fingerprint about them. And when you see outliers, you can begin to separate some of that out in terms of not being applicable. I think at best for this particular problem, you can clean things up by relying on standard patterns or more stable patterns based on other cookie IDs and the contextual fingerprint of them, of those users, and start cleaning up some of the outliers. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that you can infer a new user, you know, even to the extent of assigning them a new cookie ID or something like that. I don't know of anybody who's able to do that at this point, although it would be an interesting experiment to see if that had any validity. I hope that answers your question, Brian. Great. Well, I'll stay on for another couple of minutes for anybody who wants to hang on, but otherwise that's everything that I had today, and I certainly appreciate everybody's attention. If you'd like this set of slides that I've used today, feel free to contact us again for that or for answers to your other questions. or hopefully what you'd like to do is schedule some time with us to get deeply in the weeds and discuss how this might apply to your particular needs. Appreciate everybody's attention today. Thank you.